Hi everyone, I'm Tim Kitzrow, and they're not. You're watching Big Ryan the Fat Guy. Okay, fine, I'll say it. Boom shakalaka. There, you happy?
Yeah, but the dentist party was off the hook. What's going on, guys? It's the NFL Picks Against the Spread for Week 14, 21-22 NFL season. Fat Guy, we have been slumping 48.7%, 92 and 97 on the season with the 4 pushes. On to Thursday's game, starting off with the Pittsburgh Steelers traveling to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. Vikings 3.5-point favorites. Kind of a surprising line, I believe, to you and I, at least as far as closing line value and where this will land. Either way, the Vikings have 43% of early bets despite this line of minus 3.5.
Seems like a fake out game, doesn't it? Like, that's one thing, like, we've just been approaching this from a closing line value point of view, right? And obviously there's a lot of games that we select because we select them all where it's not, it's just, I even say, like, I don't think there's closing line value. I don't like this line. I think it's balanced on both sides. Or equilibrium, which is a phrase I really like to use. That being said, I think this should be a Minnesota -3, which does give you pause, though, right? When it's too good to be true, it probably is, right? So from a closing line perspective, I think there will be with the Pittsburgh plus 3.5 points. That hook is just huge, the biggest half point in all of sports. It's hard to ignore. It's hard to ignore, and I'm a sucker for it, right? But in the same time frame, why didn't this open at like bad juice -2.5, which has been really common, more like bad juice numbers? Or what about just Minnesota -3, even both sides? Either way, could this be a mispricing? Certainly, or it could be a little bit of a market fake out. So, and realistically, there's more at play in terms of Minnesota victory. And you got to think why, like, Pittsburgh beating Baltimore, that carries a lot of clout, does it not?
Well, the same thing as Minnesota losing to Detroit. Like,
exactly, that's what I was saying. Like,
it seems like a fishy point to put this point at. The one thing I will say at Pinnacle right now, 3.5 on the Steelers is -118. So like this is pushing back towards three. So in a contest where there's no juice, the 3.5 for Pittsburgh is going to be the very, very marginally better play to make.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is definitely more likely to come down to 3 than it is probably to stay at 3.5 or possibly go up to 4.
That being said, though, if it moves to 4, something's going on here. So this is one to look out for.
On to the next one, Fat Guy. Baltimore at Cleveland, one of these great divisional matchups. Historically, this would have been a 3-point game, but right now, Cleveland -2.5. And we can kind of see by the percentages, they've received 68% of bets. Is this right? Is there value on Cleveland? Should this game be a 3-point game? What do you think the closing line value is?
We're trying to assess closing line value again this season, and that would be Baltimore plus 2.5. I think it's more likely to go to like ball -1, ball plus 1.5, ball plus 1. It's close though. I'm not dedicated to this, and also too, we're gonna have to compare it with some of our line shifting data because I'm curious what type of. Could we all agree in the comment section, Marlon Humphrey, a top 5 corner more or less? I mean, again, I haven't used a lot of advanced statistics to prove that type of proclamation, but I don't think that's out of the question. So I'm curious. Losing a corner because he's out with season-ending pectoral injury. What kind of weight does that translate in terms of win probability? Right, like
that's a really good question because he is one of the more versatile players. Like he might not be one of the top 5, but as far as like the Swiss Army knife on defense, like how much Baltimore is able to do because of the things that he can do, like how much he impacts the other 10 players on the field is pretty astronomical. So it is and might be one of the bigger losses for a team just because of how versatile and how successful he's been at his position.
The only issue is this happened during the game, so it probably is baked into the line. So maybe this isn't the best example, but this is something that you could look for is when the money line shifts after injury news, right? The injury, it's always like a little bit delayed. Like I feel the market's usually a little bit smarter than like, Adam Schefter putting out a tweet, someone I dislike with very much vigor. But anyways, he is a generally reliable news source even though he does get it from dubious sources. That being said, the change in money line would often really minus the juice. So the true odd change, I guess we'll use the delta, like we're in chemistry 11, change in money line price would reflect that player's value, unless but then there's the argument too, with Gardner Minshew taking over for Hurts, I believe it moved from 7 to 1, 5.5 the line, or 7.5 to 5.5.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, you didn't lose Jalen Hurts per se. You switch to a different option. So it's really just a gap between that option. And then you have to think too, out of the list of quarterbacks, where does Gardner Minshew fit? He's probably 30th, to be honest. He's probably in there. So anyways, we went long on this one, but it is interesting to talk about how injuries affect lines, and do they at all for most positions, and how minute are they, especially at somewhere like cornerback. It's getting a bit interesting. We understand quarterback value is always highlighted, but rarely do we see secondary or skill position players get highlighted. On to the next.
Next game is the Raiders traveling to Arrowhead or Geha Field. I don't know how to pronounce it. Chiefs 9.5-point favorites at home. 37% of early bettors are on the Chiefs, and you have to think that's because of how they looked in primetime last night against the Denver Broncos. They had a convincing win, but it was a convincing win thanks more to the defense really than the offense.
Yeah, and I kind of felt for Denver. I know we don't like highlighting, but Denver was aggressive on fourth down.
They played a great game. The key plays just didn't work out for them.
Yeah, the 4th and 2 or whatever at the end of near the end of the first half, that really had transcending probability shift, more or less, right?
Well, they converted a 4th and 7 earlier on the drive.
Yes, they did.
It was for you and I, it's our favorite way for teams to play football, especially when it's like a David versus Goliath, because really that's what that is.
It is.
The Chiefs just have such an advantage at so many key spots, coaching, quarterback, that Denver played kind of the perfect style that game, but the Chiefs defense got it done when it mattered. They made key plays when they needed to get it done. And it's harder as a defense to make those plays when you have to play 4 downs, right? Denver's trying to get stops on 3 downs. The Chiefs defense is trying to get stops on 4 downs. It makes it 25% harder, or that's probably the math.
Well, it's not quite it, but yes. And just like you said though, is there really a coaching edge when one guy's going for it at key spots where another guy isn't?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because coaching,
that's the argument, right?
Well, the argument is, I guess, that you could make is that the Chiefs are a more talented team. So the more talent, the more resources that you have, the less aggressive that you need to be. So I think, in theory, Denver felt like this was a game where they had to be more aggressive, and it was so nice to see. Something that you and I talk about personally is that it wasn't like Denver was waffling. It wasn't like there was 15 seconds on the play clock and they're standing around. They knew what they were doing. They went for it. It didn't work out. But that's a game that, 2 or 3 plays go different. This is with any game, but 2 or 3 plays go differently because of the coaching, and they win that game. But it just didn't seem to go in their favor this time. But the coaching was great. I thought the coaching decisions were great in Denver last night.
And also, too, sorry we're going long on that, but think about even if you just really do the really most simple guerrilla math, and say you give them 3 field goals, you know what I mean? What's the difference? You still lose. You know what I mean? Whereas the other option is just going to give you a high variance in results. You're going to get beat really bad a lot of the time, and you're also going to win a little bit of the time, but a lot more than you would have if you've been conservative. Because I almost don't know how you can win just kicking field goals when you're a team like that.
Yeah.
Not that Denver is horrible, but it's just hard to beat teams like Kansas City, even though this is probably the worst iteration of Kansas City we've seen in the Mahomes era.
Yeah, at least offensively. And we're going on a complete tangent here. We haven't even mentioned the Raiders Chargers, but It reminds me of the Chargers-Bengals game was kind of similar. Like super aggressive coaching on both sides, going for, fourth downs, going for 2-point conversions, lots of turnovers, which will happen. Like the more aggressive you play, theoretically, the more turnovers you're going to have. But really, I see that as the future of football and where things are kind of moving towards. So that game was a pleasure to watch. The Broncos were a pleasure to watch as a hefty underdog, let's say, really trying to push the envelope because they're not there to cover. They're there to win, and it just didn't work out for them.
Well, we're highlighting this because there's a paradigm shift. This might be crossing the chasm.
Yeah.
Vic Fangio's the oldest coach in the NFL aside from Pete Carroll?
Yeah,
he's
maybe
adapting.
And I think you're right. I was thinking of Cully for some reason, but
no. But if he's adapting, there has to be this has to mark, like, we're at the top of where like this is starting to be adopted, right? Yeah. Because it can't go unnoticed, and that's just going to start changing how we look at spreads, right? Because if teams aren't trying to cover, money line might be the new way. You know,
especially for dogs, like especially for dogs, just because you're going to get that higher variance of results, which it's the more you stray from either side, the more likely you are to hit on an underdog winning a game outright.
That being said, I'm not sure if the Raiders interim coach is going to take those approaches, and if he is, it almost makes Kansas City a little bit more viable here. We're going to take Kansas City 9.5 here. I don't know if there's closing line value, to be honest, on either or. I do think this is a little bit of a fake out because generally this would be a classic home run. Big Ryan, the fat guy pick, take the Raiders, take the points when in doubt. This is one of those spots where I think it opened up a little bit high, but there wasn't like an aggressive move. So what did that tell me? That since if you open up a line that's mispriced, the good betting accounts at the good exchanges are going to smash those early line bets at lower limits. And it's kind of like the trade-off they have. Like they lose a little bit to those early better pros to get a stronger number. But when those early better pros don't move that number, that makes me think that they're tending to take Kansas City and laying the 9.5 points here. So that's going to be the selection for the week in a very segued game game selection.
Well, and how the Chiefs they didn't really pass the eye test last night. They
didn't look good in any game. They
did play well defensively, but they didn't really pass that eye test. Stopping Denver's offense, I think for a lot of people, they're kind of it's to be expected. That's what we think is going to happen, even though Denver's offense is a lot more talented than I think the public thinks. But to me, if they open this game at 7, we probably have 50-50 bets, but they didn't. They opened it at 9.5. There's been more people betting the Raiders early on. And I think for you and I that it's
an alarm bell.
It is an alarm bell. And when it looks too good to be true, we're probably going to take the other side, which is Kansas City in this case. On to the next one. That was super long. Dallas at Washington. Washington plus 5. 64% of bettors are on the surging Washington football team. Fat guys are closing line value in this game.
Probably on Washington, I would imagine. I could see this closing at Dallas -4. You got to remember 5 is probably the most malleable number, considering it has no key number touching either side. 4.5 isn't that good. 5.5 is inconsequential. So even if you shift to 5.5, you're not really losing anything. So I think the value is to be had on the very exciting football team, if we can call them that, against the Dallas, who had a decent performance against a handicapped New Orleans side on Thursday Night Football.
On to the next one. Sorry, I was just looking at score distributions. Atlanta at Carolina. Carolina opened as 3-point favorites. Standard divisional line here between two teams that are fairly even. 58% of bettors are on the Panthers -3. Fat guy. Carolina just fired offensive coordinator Joe Brady. Does that have any impact here? Is there any value? This is kind of a very, very standard line for a divisional matchup between two teams that are viewed probably similarly by the public and us, to be honest.
Standard, and I would call it inelastic, right? The move to 2.5 or the move to 3.5 is just massive on this type of market.
Yeah.
So I think this is a standard line. I don't think it moves. The only thing that will be an indicator is juice shift. So you should be able to give you a good indication of where it could be moving when juice starts creeping in either direction. So that is it is a possibility here. So and Big Rye's looking at it right now. Atlanta's minus 116, so that would suggest an Atlanta, plus 3.5, or sorry, Atlanta plus 2.5, rather situation. It's more likely to go that direction, but that still doesn't mean it will. That being said, considering it's a zero juice game, we're going to take the game, in this picks contest, we're going to take Atlanta here, and we're going to take the 3 points. But Atlanta 2.5 is the only shift that I could foresee happening.
Yeah, and this is also one of those ones where traditionally, like by traditionally I mean like maybe over the last 10 years, barring the last year or two, home field advantage -3 is kind of the standard, but home field advantage has kind of gone away a little bit, and that also is probably why we would lean towards taking the points, because 2 and even 1 have become more key numbers than they were maybe historically. Fat Guy, next up, Saints at the Jets. Jets +6 at home. 23% of brave bettors are on the Jets +6. Do you see any closing line value, any market value in this game?
I'm not sure if I can ascertain closing line value, though, but I want that number 6 here, and that I'm going to be taking the Jets. 6 is a very key number these days. Way more than, like you said, the last 2 years, much more so over the last 8 previous. But that sample isn't that big, right? So you got to remember, when you're analyzing football data, how many games we got a year? 256, I guess, with the added 17.
Like 267 now, somewhere around that.
267. Okay,
no,
yeah.
Well, actually, no, higher. It's
higher.
It's like around
Doesn't
280.
matter.
Let's say
280. Yeah, 280. That's like a drop in the bucket if you're analyzing like 1 year. Like 1 year of college basketball data is what, 15 years of NFL data. So like you're able to learn a lot more, right? Like there's a lot more inference made when trying to make NFL proclamation. So you end up having to do this thing where you group numbers into certain areas, you group teams, because you have to kind of extrapolate that data. But there has been really, really strong showing for the number 6. Obviously 7 and 3, those are the big boys, but 6 is in there. There's more 2-point conversions, more missed pats. I'm sure everyone can know. Everyone can notice.
I'm going to blow your mind, but 6 and 7 have actually been equal. So 6 and 7 right
I didn't
now
know it was that close.
Are equal in a smaller sample size of games. In 400 or so games. It's been
400 games. Okay.
It's been the tied for second for the most key number, 6.
Yeah, after 3, right? So there you go. Big Rye over the sample of 400, 6. So I would still say, though, that 7 is, even though the last 400 it's equal with games finishing in 7, I still say, if you consider the past 10 years, it's slightly worse off. But again, like he said, the rules have changed, right? Like since the rules have changed. So 6 is really up there, right? That's why I like 7.5. That half point on 7.5 is really, really big.
It's even bigger now than it was before.
Than ever, realistically. And that was a number that I always honed in on. So anyways, Jets +6. I don't want to lose that half point. I'm going to take the Jets. And if it ends up at 6.5, I guess that's a negative, certainly. But I'm more afraid of the trend down to 5.5 than I am at the trend down to 6. So Jets +6.
Thank you, Fat Guy. On to the next one, Jacksonville at Tennessee. Tennessee kind of in this weird -8.5 range, 31% of early bettors on the Titans. If I'm not mistaken, Fat Guy, this 8.5 is kind of like in that teaser range.
It is. This is a long teaser range. If you did a 6-point teaser, this would go down to Tennessee -2.5 here, right? So
passing 3 key numbers of 3, 6, and 7, as we talked about.
Yeah, and if anything, long teasers are stronger nowadays. I know we're actually not really talking about the games; we're talking about numbers, but that's what we are. We're betting numbers here. I do a little aside here, even though we're going long with this recording. Is I took a big, I made a bunch of hockey bets with another person, a colleague, we'll call him, and he played hockey his whole life, and I destroyed him. But the moral of the story was, someone said to him, he goes, "You weren't playing hockey, you were gambling." Well, he'd never gambled before, right? And I was just betting good prices. That was it. Was it a small sample victory? Sure, anything could have happened, absolutely. But in the long run, when you're more omniscient of key numbers and understanding where there's value and where there isn't value potentially, and you at least apply that in conjunction with your own opinions, you're more likely to lead to success than not, especially over a long term. That being said, I just think it's Jacksonville plus 8.5 is going to be the play here. I don't really like this game. I'm not that interested in it, but it is interesting to see an 8.5 here because we haven't seen too many 8.5s because it does set up that long teaser, right? We're more likely to see a 9. We're more likely to see a 9.5 line, and I feel like those 9.5s, much like the Kansas City game, perhaps, are less likely to move off it because you don't want to open up yourselves to a long teaser. Because if you look at the University of Northern Las Vegas, they put out gambling statistics in terms of revenue, and if you look up, they're on average for the last 20 years between teasers and parlays, they're making about 35% ROI.
It's absolutely crazy.
So think about that. For every dollar wagered, they keep 35 cents. And you're going to be like, oh, that's not that much. In baseball, they keep 2 cents. So think of it that way. Think of it that way.
A yearly return of 35% on any investment is an excellent investment.
But that's the other issue, too, is people have gone a little bit crazy with the prospects. If you think about the last 4 years of investing, the crypto space, meme stocks, like, yes, but this is not the norm. I mean, I guess maybe it is now. Maybe I'm wrong. But over the last 20 years, 10% a year was great. 35% a year is bonkers. So that just puts you in touch with how likely, how important those markets are, teasers and parlays, because they're mostly sucker bets. I'm sorry to the betting public that does listen to the show, that does bet them. I'm not insulting you. I'm insulting the action. I'm insulting the verb of betting parlays and teasers.
Well, it's predatory by the books. That's really what it comes down to.
It feels like it. And like I said, the only danger for the books is this 8.5. But this does give you an idea, though. Like, this is probably going to be the least bet game here, I would imagine, on the docket. Jacksonville, Tennessee. No one's actually running to the races to do that. So that's why I think they're more likely to lay up a number like 8.5 than they are. Like, maybe the true number is 9 or 9.5, and maybe I'm losing value. But I'm going to take Jacksonville here, and I figure it'll just be – this is purely a handicapping. I don't think necessarily closing line value, but I did want to point out the importance of 8.5 in terms of ROI reflection in teasers and parlays for Las Vegas and the offshore books.
On to the next one. Seattle at Houston. Houston plus 7.5. 39% of bettors are on the Texans. Fat Guy, is there any value in this game?
Well, this is the one. I do actually think it's more likely to shift to 8 or 8.5. But we just went to, I'm going to say 8. But we just went over this, though. I would rather take a lower probability chance of it shifting to taking 7.5, even though there's a higher probability of it shifting to 8, because I don't want to lose this half point. This half point is godly. It's the second best half point behind from 3 to 3.5. And we just mentioned it. Over the last 400 games have ended in 7 and 6 in equal amount of times. So what does that tell you? To tell you this half point is massive, right? So because it's otherwise you just get a push on 7. I need that value. If it goes to 8, I don't really like that half point between 7.5 and plus 8. You know what I mean? I can't lose this hook. So that being said, it's going to be Houston, even though probability wise, I think it's more likely to shift to 8.
Well, yeah, like a shift to, like, if this shifts to 7. Or, like, let's say that shifts to 6.5. That's the same as this shifting to 9.5. That's the amount.
Yeah,
like,
that's a good example.
It's 1 point to cross 7, where it's 2 points to cross 8 and 9. So it just makes more sense here. There's a lot more value underneath 7.5 as we get closer to 0. That at 6 and 7 than there is at 8 and 9. If it gets up to 10, of course, that's a different story. But 10 is a different key number. In fact, on to the next one. Detroit at Denver. Denver minus 8. 55% of early bettors are on the Broncos early on. This is a line.
Well, I actually am very interested in this game. And why am I interested in this game? I want to see Vic Fangio's decision-making process. Now, is he jilted after a one-game sample of losing to Kansas City with some of his fourth-down decisions not working out, obviously, like he'd like to? Will that jilt him from the strategy? Or will he go away from that strategy because he's playing Detroit and he feels like he doesn't need to necessarily, who Detroit picked up their first win in some time. And Jared Goff's first win with a coach other than Sean McVay. which means nothing, but it is interesting that that's highlighted. So I do think 8 points is too many. I am going to take Detroit here, but I think the 8 points is potentially more valuable if Denver reverts back to a conservative strategy, which I think was probably more likely to happen. But I want to know if Vic Fangio has just made a full jump, or was that that vaunted matchup against Kansas City on the road, which was a very important game to win, was that just like a one-off more or less? So I'm curious from this game as a betting as a betting fan, just to see where the strategies change, because we talked about the chasm crossing potentially with older coaches adopting aggression on fourth down. So I want to see if this game follows that same strategy they employed on Kansas City. Detroit +8 though, as far as the contest goes.
Next up, Fat Guy, Giants at Chargers. And just to highlight, this game isn't actually up at Pinnacle, so we've pulled this line from other books. And we talked about it before. The only reason we can think that it might not be up at Pinnacle is the uncertainty on Daniel Jones's neck injury. But either way, the most consistent line we could find was 10. 56% of early bettors, albeit probably a very small sample of bettors on the Giants. Do you think there's closing line value here? Do you think it matters who plays quarterback?
Well, I'd say obviously that Daniel Jones would be better if he played. That being said, that's why you go, you go New York Giants. That's the way you go here with +10. It is interesting to me though. Like, think about it. Pinnacle's probably the best sports book in the world. Why did they, like, they're more conservative in terms of taking lines off the board. They're more likely to do so than I feel these other books. And I almost feel like that's how these other books could possibly get a competitive advantage. But think about the flow of information. Like, maybe these books are just gambling more, and they are going to get beat by some people with really good injury. We'll call it injury information interpretation, even though that's a bit of word salad, a little bit chunky, not as succinct as I'd like it to be, but it is probably the most accurate way I could describe that type. That being said, that's how I think you can get an edge, especially in the year of the way COVID protocols are. I think there's a lot more, obviously that's not necessarily the case with Daniel Jones, but that is a way for you to get an edge over the books, just to be more savvy. I bet you social media tracking is something that we're very weak on, to be honest. We don't put any time into. It is a way to get an advantage on the books. I'm going to take the Giants +10. Solely, when in doubt, take the point, especially if you do get this is built. I think this is built negatively too, right? Like, as if he's most likely not. But that being said, I think they're more likely to have Daniel Jones and get the 10 points for the Giants. I think that's probably the way to go. But like I said, you're always trying to get edges, and injury edges, especially COVID outs. That might be. I mentioned this before, but that might be a way for the user to get an edge. It's probably a lot more simple than for those that aren't exactly math savvy. So the pick's gonna be Giants +10.
The other thing I can think of that other books will have the line out before Pinnacle at times, especially when there's uncertainty with the news, is that those books offer worse juice in most cases. Yeah. So their margin of error can be larger than somewhere
that's
like
true.
Pinnacle.
That's a very good point.
But that's, just theory. On to the next game, San Fran at Cincy. This is going to be a very nice matchup, and the line kind of shows it. Bengals -1. 38% of early bettors are on the home Bengals. Fat Guy, do you have a lean in this game? Is there a side that you think that there's going to be more value? Is the market showing any info that you could reflect on?
I don't think I have a strong viewpoint on this game. I think for the contest, we're going to take Cincinnati -1. I'm more interested from an entertainment standpoint. And I want to see, like, Cincinnati LAC was like an up-tempo, interesting game. And I'm curious if Cincinnati takes that approach again. What, much like the Vic Fangio thing, we're going to talk about fourth down decision-making more and more, it seems. Is Kyle Shanahan going to keep up? Because we've seen him go both ways realistically, right? We haven't seen him reach the aggression level of the Chargers, who are almost aggressive to a fault at times, right? Like, they probably make some negative, too aggressive fourth down decisions. Either way, it ends up in entertaining football. Can't argue that. So I want to see if Cincinnati decides to put, foot on the gas pedal. Is San Francisco going to keep up and push the tempo as much, because these offenses realistically are built, for they're built for points realistically.
Yeah.
San Francisco goes about it a completely different way, but that doesn't mean they're not they're not able to move the ball down the field. So I'm interested from a fan standpoint. I'm going to take Cincinnati -1 in the contest, but I should have stronger feelings about it, but I certainly don't.
On to the next one, Buffalo at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay -3.5 point favorites. Almost a surprise, at least to me, just with it being so many points. And it looks like it's, since the betting public, 62% are on the Bills at +3.5. So, Fat Guy, what do you think about this line, and if there's value on either side?
It's a look-ahead line, so there is danger if you do take the Bills. You got to remember that, because don't forget the Bills are playing this evening.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Against, do you get injured more in bad weather? I don't know. But there is a chance that someone could get hurt. Of course, the Bills would have to lose someone important, i.e., Josh Allen is obviously from the gap between him and Mitchell Trubisky would drop their win probability the most of any injury.
Yeah, like with this probably would get above 7 then if Trubisky plays, maybe even higher.
I think that here's a good one for the comment section. What do you think this line would shift if, not that we're trying to wish bad omen on Josh Allen, but had something, say he was unable to play for whatever reason, and they had to shift from him to Mitchell Trubisky, who I assume is who they would select for the backup. Where would this line shift? I feel like Tampa Bay -8, actually, that seems about right. Even though, not all points are made the same, right? Like a 4.5 point shift from -3.5 to 8 is massive, right? Because like we said, we go over the next two key numbers after 3, 6, and 7. So that is really, really strong. So that being said, that is a possibility. I still don't think that's going to happen. It's very low likelihood, especially someone like Josh Allen is, I feel like at this, obviously your chances of getting injured, I think, is a trend line that goes up as you get older, clearly, because you're less athletic, you're less likely to evade danger, especially as a quarterback. So mind you, you're probably less likely to put pressure on your joints, but this is a whole nother debate. Another thing we're weak on that we would really like to get better at is injury prognostication. That being said, Buffalo +3.5 I think is going to be the play, solely because that half point is just so big, and Tampa Bay winning by 3 doesn't seem like an unrealistic proposition, and Buffalo even winning is not that unlikely. So that being said, I do like this the Bills with this extra half point.
Well, the other thing, too, is I'm wondering if that half point is just built in because Buffalo hasn't played yet, and they're, factoring in the chance of Josh Allen getting hurt. Do you see, if Allen's healthy after this game, do you see that shifting down to 3, or you think 3.5 is kind of?
I don't know. Probably I would just assume that the juice would get slightly worse, because you can't shift a half point. But then again, it's just that's still a guess. Like we haven't gone through that. You know what I mean? Like comparing look-ahead lines to shifts,
especially
after the game shifts,
and it's going to be bigger for the bigger of a gap there is between your starting quarterback and whatever the backup is. That's
theoretically, but is this or then you could also make the case, are look-ahead line markets that sophisticated? Again, we don't know. That's another thing that we have point. It just completely, you see what I mean? You just keep talking, you keep theorizing. Like there's not enough hours in the day to investigate these things. So we have to band together. That's why we have the Discord, Big Rye, is to shoot ideas, hopefully get some information and people working on different things and finding different things and sharing. Of course, I'm plugging our membership because I am proud of that Discord, and I think it's, I've learned a lot, even being, I guess, a moderator in a sense, both of us. You still learn a lot from other people investigating other things, or at least challenging your ideas and adjusting them, right? Like it's very difficult to learn all these things all at once. That being said, as a contest pick, it will be Buffalo +3.5.
On to the Sunday night game, Chicago at Green Bay. Green Bay's opened at, as I want to say, an astronomical -13 here. 68% of people, though, are still on the Packers as 13-point favorites. Fat Guy, is there closing line value? Is there market value? What do you think about this line?
I don't really like this one. I'm actually very not interested in this game, and I can't give a solid gold seal stamp of approval in terms of betting on either side. I'm just going to, when in doubt, I'm going to take the points with the Chicago Bears. It's some of these bad teams like the Bears, it's difficult to when when is it enough points? Do you know what I mean? Because it's very easy to pile on. They did get a little bit aggressive with Arizona, and again, following that trend of this show, trend of the NFL is fourth down decision making becoming more aggressive. And are these teams going to stick with that? That's the only thing I want to see from Chicago. Is you are in the dark corner. If you're Matt Nagy, you're almost certainly losing your job. Realistically, it's not looking good by the end of the year, or sorry, at the end of the year. Will he stick with an aggressive approach and go out with a bang, or is he going to go out with a whimper? So that's what I want to see. Is Chicago going to be pure aggressive in this game, considering they're just underdogs across the board and most highlighted at quarterback. So I'm going to take the Bears plus 13 solely as a contest pick, solely because it's one and down, take points.
This is one of those games where in my head I just saw the Sunday Night Football preview and I kind of went, what do I think the line's going to be? And I was fighting between 10 and 10.5. So I was just surprised to see it open at 13, even though like the gap between 13 and 10.5 is actually quite small.
No, it's not that big. Yeah.
But at least like visually, it looks like a lot bigger than, from 10.5 to 13.
Yes.
On to the Monday night game. This game is going to be 5-star entertainment, one of the best matchups of the year, really. LA Rams at the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals 3-point favorites at home. 79% of early bettors are on the home team, Arizona Cardinals. Fat Guy, do you think there's closing line value on this game or market value with only 21% of bettors being on the Rams early on?
Yeah, this is another one of those classic lines. Like you said, it's a divisional matchup. This is a revenge game, and revenge games I really think are meaningless. Like maybe at one point they were, but like it's kind of like reading the Wall Street Journal for a stock pick. When really common people are using terms like revenge, I can promise you that any sort of month, like 1 month value that it might have provided 25 years ago doesn't exist anymore. At least I could be. I haven't researched revenge games, but that being said, Arizona trounced the Rams on the road in their first meeting. I think 3 is probably the right line. I'm just going to take the points here, and it's solely a contest pick, and I want to watch this for entertainment value. Again, this is a classic matchup. Like it's like Atlanta, Carolina. Like this falls in that same type of they're different strength of teams, but they're probably equally as different, Atlanta, Carolina, and the Rams and the Cardinals. So this will solely be a contest pick, and I just want to watch it as a fan.
And if revenge games don't mean so much, then why am I practicing this much Mario Tennis? Fat Guy, on to the lightning round. We'll start off with Pittsburgh at Minnesota.
Pittsburgh.
Baltimore at Cleveland.
Baltimore.
Raiders at the Chiefs.
Kansas City.
Dallas at the Washington football team.
Washington.
Falcons, Panthers.
Falcons.
Saints, Jets.
Jets.
Jacksonville at Tennessee.
Jags.
Seattle at Houston.
Houston Texans.
Detroit at Denver.
Detroit.
Giants at LAC.
Giants.
San Fran at Cincy.
The Bengals.
Buffalo at Tampa Bay.
Bills.
Chicago at Green Bay.
Bears.
And finally, Monday Night Football, LA Rams at the Arizona Cardinals.
Rams.
Wow, you're
It's
excited.
Rams.
You're excited for that one.
I actually am.
Congrats to the Week 12 winner, really, Detroit and Mimo, going 11-4 against the spread in the contest. Good for 73%. Congrats, Detroit and Mimo. And then we'll take a look at the Week 13 leaderboard. Corey Andy sitting on top at 10-3, good for 77% against the spread. We also have Mud and Billy 369 at 9-4, and then a handful. AAA, Detroit and Mimo again. Fat Guy's best friend, Mussman the Busman.
My wife's my best friend.
R999 and the real Slim Brady, all 8-5. Congrats to you guys all being above 60% this week. And then onto the overall leaderboard where Colty Boy still has a healthy lead, 114 wins in 193 games. Cassone is hot on his tail, though. But Colty Boy is hitting above 60%, which is super, super impressive. Also, a shout-out to Wook Dog, who, despite missing a week, has 99 wins in 177 games.
Look at that percentage.
Yeah, that's technically second as far as percentages go, at least with a respectable sample size of games played. So congrats to all of you guys that are in the top 10 right now. Very, very strong season so far. Fat guy, on to the JS715 name of the week honorable mentions.
Lions plus $1 million to win the SD50, win the Super Bowl 56. Is that a 1 or a 2-unit play? I think we can answer that and go with that's a $1 play. Regardless, it's a min bet. It's a min bet wager if you were to make it. Interesting though. If they're still live,
I think they had a scenario where they could still make the playoffs, but I think it didn't quite work out this week. So I think they officially
got ended.
I think so, but I'm not 100% sure. They had I don't know. There might be a scenario. I haven't taken a look though. Either way, $1 million to 1 is the
$1 wager.
Suffice to say.
Cousins touched my butt, thinking I was the center, and I liked it. Well, there you go. Buy the dip at Falcons. Now, this one, my recent stock market career has been very mired with these things, and I always find it interesting because it's a very Twitter friendly thing. And I'm a bit of a silver and gold bug, so I've just bought the dip so many times. It's like, how much money does everyone have left over? And then also too, if you're able to keep buying the dip, you didn't have very much conviction the last time because you didn't buy very much of it because you still had money left over this time. Unless everyone just seems to be so financially prudent that they're just waiting for these moments. I find that to be a dubious assumption at best. I decided to flip a coin to make all my picks this week. It can't get any worse than last. That's the funny thing too about that name is it's seeped in truth. Most of us are just flipping coins in simulations inside our brains and really have much less of an impact on decision making than you would think. No more atmospheric rivers, of course, highlighting some torrential weather issues that we have had that have plagued even the technology part of the Big Ryan the Fat Guy. So you guys are feeling it a little bit. Don't pick my name of the week. I will do the opposite of what you say. I hate authority. Got more wins than the Detroit Lions. That's not saying much. Always wear your khakis and red shirt to Target. Employee discount. It's a good idea. I just wanted to let everyone know that during the holidays, that might be an employable strategy because that's what we try and do here.
This is the JS715 name of the week. Whoa, kaboom!
A dentist, the most interesting man in the world. I don't know why people don't think dentists would be interesting to talk to, especially if you don't know anything about the medical profession.
Make your picks against the spread for week 14 at BigRyanTheFatGuy.com. There's $100 USD prize in Bitcoin to the regular season winner. Fat Guy, that's it. Picks against the spread for week 14. Some interesting, some fishy lines this week, let's say. Some interesting ones. Starting off with that Thursday one. Like Minnesota minus 3.5 to me is perplexing. The Chiefs at -0.5 is perplexing. We can't see it because we're hiding it, but Green Bay minus 13 I find is very high. A lot of interesting lines. It's not a lot of close lines either. Pretty much every game here is past that threshold of 3. But that's it. Do you have any other final points you wanted to make? Yes, I do have
one thing to say is don't draw harsh conclusions about these games that we're saying are fishy. Like watching the game and seeing a blowout by Minnesota, does that make it right? No, that's just one iteration. So what you have to do is you have to basket all of these into one and then come up with, in this instant or perceived instant that I believe, is there any statistical relevance to one side or the other? That's what you have to do. And it is December, so I'm getting my elf hair on.
Thanks for watching, guys, and good luck for your picks and your plays in week 14.